R53 Mini Cooper lower engine mounts. Out with the old, in with the new. I didn't see any videos on how to do this, and so I thought it was super easy. Now that I'm doing it, there's kind of like a little trickery that needs to happen, so I'll show you what I did. Okay, so I didn't catch the removal of the mount. This is how it sits. It sits in here, and obviously this is on the other side, up in there. But it's 2 bolts to take it out. There's a bolt that goes through this hole, and a bolt that goes through that hole. And you don't even have to have a nut on the other side. You can see it's part of where it mounts to. But they come out really easy, and then you just need a pry bar. That way you can kind of pry the engine this way. See it swinging? You gotta pry the engine and it slips out. And that was really easy, but it's hard to get it back in. So I think it's gonna be helpful if you remove this, or this eyelet mounts. You can see I've already got it loose. So I'm gonna remove this, and I'm gonna remove the power steering fan too. I don't know how this comes off, but I'll show you what it looks like when those 2 things are removed. So here we are removing the power steering fan. It's actually not necessary to take this off, but it just helps with space. And it's only 2 13mm nuts that hold it on. So remove those, and then remove the electrical connector. It's a pretty simple push clip that'll take that out, and then the power steering fan assembly is removed. And the only other thing to remove is this bracket that holds in the other side of the engine mount. There are 4 bolts that hold it in place. Go ahead and remove that, and you will have plenty of space to slip in the new engine mount. One thing to note is that this does face down, so when you're reinstalling this bracket, just make sure you have it oriented correctly. And I mean, here you can see there's so much space. It's so worth it to just remove this bracket, 4 bolts, and you won't have any headaches. So I go ahead and just slip in 2 bolts into the bracket to hold it in place. And then one quick note about the engine mount itself, it is directional. It's flat, so it'll go in either way, but I just noticed this nub sticking up on this side, and on the other side it's receded. So make sure that the nub side is facing up when you reinstall it. And then after that, you're basically done. Just put everything back the same way you took it apart. One thing to note, I didn't have this lined up perfectly, and I wasn't able to work it with my hands now that, you know, some bolts are in place and things are getting a little tighter. So my trick here is I just grab a screwdriver and I send it through where the bolt goes, and I'm looking from the other side, and this kind of helps me align it nice and straight so that I can get that bolt in there. Looking from the other side, I can see the threads are catching. Good to go. If you want to know the torque specs for these bolts, I have bad news for you. I don't know what they are. I do own the Haynes manual for this car, and I took a quick look. I couldn't find them. I figured it wasn't that important. These bolts aren't supporting the weight of the engine. It's just a secondary mount to prevent it from rocking back and forth. So I just got them nice and tight. If you do know the torque specs, feel free to drop them in the comments. That'll probably help other people out. One thing you can kind of see here is the cord for the power steering fan. When you put the power steering fan in, make sure that cord isn't wrapped around the drive shaft that's right above it. I was kind of knocking around while I was installing it, so just one thing to note while you're putting everything back together. But yeah, everything's tightened up at this point. Here's kind of what it looks like without that power steering fan in place. And one note about the power steering fan, I'll kind of cut to a clip here of what it looked like when I took it out. Blech, look at that. I had a power steering leak for a little bit, so that kind of explains it. But I just, you know, for a minute or two, took a paper towel, wiped it all off. I like this car, and I'm going to keep it for a long time. Why not get all that gunk out of there? So nice, clean power steering fan is installed with those 2 bolts. And one thing to note, make sure that the front lip of that power steering fan is sitting above your oil drain bolt. When I initially put it in place, it was sitting below it, but the proper orientation is above it. And here's another money shot of your brand new lower engine mount. And that's how you change the bottom motor mount. If this video helped you out, shoot me a like. If it didn't help, or if I said something wrong, call me an idiot in the comments. My page is still pretty new, so I'll take all the engagement I can get. Thanks.